So this is a historic garden, and Kathleen marriage, I don't tell the best story, so I will start with Kathleen marriage was a very important person. She, as I understand it, in the early 20th century, late 18th century, she worked to bring alpine plants from Colorado into the horticultural sphere, and trade them to people in the old world in England. And so this was a very important place, and it was her garden, and so it has fallen into disrepair until we recently got a grant to buy plants, native plants for the garden. And planting native is a pretty important concept in Colorado because it's so dry here, and so we want to make sure that we have plants that are well adapted and also that work with the birds and the bees and the animals, right? And all the fauna and flora here are accustomed to the plants that have been here over time. When we move in and introduce our new plants, they starve basically. They're in a foreign place. It would be like if someone just lifted you up and you woke up tomorrow and you were in Tokyo and you had to figure out how to eat and how to survive. And so we focus on native plants. They're also very drought tolerant. This is a garden that we're watering by hand, so we have no supplemental water. So as far as ecosystem services goes, planting with natives also helps us to conserve water. So as you can see, this is a typical design for an early garden in the late 19th century, early 20th century, where it's very formalized, right? So even though we're using the plants that would be found in the prairie and in the foothills, we have planted them in a formal way, to model that kind of historic structure and also to educate people. So you'll see that around all the plants there are these rocks, and the rocks have the names of the plants on them. So it will help people to become gardeners and to learn the botany of Colorado. And then as we look down to the lower flanks here, we can walk over here. This is what we're going to work on today. So we are in the prairie foothills transition, and just watch out for this plant, but you can come right in here. So this lower part here we want to restore to an actual prairie. And the ranger, the city ranger who, Mark Tatro, who works in Sonderman Park here, he and I used to work together for Rocky Mountain Field Institute, and we would close trails. So there are many trails that are overabundant, right? We don't need so many pathways through the native landscape. So we would scarify the soil. We would take a pigmatics, which I'll show you later, and we would rough up this soil. Imagine this was a trail. And then we would sprinkle the native grass seed on it, and we would top it off with a light sprinkling of mulch, and we would walk away. No supplemental water. And because these plants are adapted to the landscape, we took trails that have 0% cover all the way up to 40 and 70% cover. And that's what we're going to do here in this part that I cleared. We are not preserving any of this mulch here that was on top because it's really filled with tons of seeds of weeds. It has kochia, smooth brome, and cheatgrass. And if you come and look at it real closely, you can see the cheatgrass seeds are just all mixed into it. And so we're making the choice to remove it from this section and then rough up the soil so there's more air and space, add the seeds and a light covering of mulch, and then we walk away. We will do that in this middle third today. I didn't clear it yet. But then over here, we're going to do another experiment. This is an observational study, right? We are helping the city to understand how to restore the landscape here in Colorado Springs. And one of the great legacies of our city is that the city owns tons of land, tons of it. And there's just a couple dozen people who are trying to take care of it. And so it's important that we help them to understand what plants are native, what plants would grow without water, so we just don't end up with a wasteland once we start recreating in all these landscapes. So as we rake this mulch that is filled with seeds of weeds, we're going to have this third be a place where we top seed with the natives and we see how they can compete with the non-natives, okay? And also it will be non-native soil because this decomposing mulch is much more organic. It has so much more organic matter in it. So everything about this third is going to be alien, right? But it will be the do nothing, let's see how hard the seeds can work area. Here we are going to use plugs. So this is like the highest amount of effort, right? This section represents the highest amount of effort. We're going to scarify the soil, we're going to add the seeds, and we're going to add plants. And so it's giving it every fighting chance. We removed the weed seeds, we added actual specimens and seed, and we will be watering it too. So now let's look over here. So in this section, we are just going to seed, and we're going to do exactly what the city rangers do to close trails and roads. For example, in Ute Valley, Mark was telling me they just closed like an 8-foot wide road. They just take the tiller, they till up the road base, they sprinkle the native seed, and they're not even putting mulch on that. Then they rake the seed in, and walk away. And so I will have pictures of that to share with you someday soon. But here we'll take up the fabric on a different day. We'll we'll rough up the soil, we'll put the seeds down, we'll rake them in, and we'll walk away. So this will be, you know, this kind of native do-nothing such situation, whereas the far other side is imagine you're in like a garden wasteland, right? A garden that hasn't been taken care of that you want to restore to a prairie. And then in the middle, it will be like all hands on deck, the most active restoration that we can do. So that's what we're gonna do. And we'll walk down here and see all these beautiful plants. Today we wanna work on that side. And so